go ahead and draw this down. It's at this point I like to preach at people a little bit on hammer size, and I do it for a good reason. So a lot of people think that you have to have a ton of physical acuity to be able to do this craft, and that's not so. I did all that work in that one heat there with a 1 3/4 pound hammer. Okay, I've been doing this for a long time. So muscle building up, some stamina to do it is something that you have to do. You have to build up. It is a physical craft. But what matters more is accuracy in progressive forging. So starting at your thick end, if you're trying to draw a taper, make a thin spot where the metal can move to, and then just keep working it to that point. And doing it in a progressive manner, progressive forging steps. The orchestration of that forging process, of the various forging steps that you do along the path, really does make or break the amount of time you're going to have to spend forging something. If you're welding all day at the other end of a bar and you need this end of the bar tapered or forged out, but you're welding on the other end of the bar, it's going to take you until Jesus comes back for you to, get that done. So having your steps planned out, having the orchestration of processes figured out, what step goes where, right, is more important than physical prowess or picking up a 40-pound hammer and swinging for the fences. I've watched guys with 5-pound hammers that can't move metal as fast as me and my 1 3/4 pound hammer. And it's based upon that accuracy. That's really the only difference. Obviously, physics are involved. If they were swinging just as hard with a 5-pound hammer, yeah, the 5-pound hammer is going to hit harder, it's going to do more damage. But I guarantee you that guy will spend about 3/4 more of his time trying to clean up what he's done than what I've done. Just being more accurate with it. So this is really a great craft for women, children, men, people who, elderly. You can get in at this craft at any stage. I've had a few older smiths say, hey, I'm 78 and I'm just getting started in this. Do you think like this is a good idea? Do you think I can, do what you do? And I tell them absolutely. You have to work with your own body and you can get started in it. Because it's just as much, I would say it's 90% up here, about 10% here. It's a lot of labor. It's a lot of management and less labor. So, kind of like a marriage, right, Jess?
Yeah.
I got to point her out. So, she does 90% of the work, and I do the 10. I do the dumb stuff. Maybe I can show that real quick and continue on with this hook process. I'm trying to stay timely. There is a lot of work to make that hook, so I'm going to try to be timely with my side tangents and demonstrations. I'm going to get this nice and hot above the scaling heat. Where it's at. And I'm going to brush this clean, and I'm going to hold it up. You guys can just watch the scale reform. And so it's pointless. That's why there's always more scale. There's always going to be more scale. So bring it out. I'm going to clean it nice and clean as fast as I can. Just hold it up here. So I've just cleaned the surface and I put it back where it can just build more scale on it. You see it pimpling up there? Hopefully everybody can see that. Right? So I can come along and I brush this again. build it on there pretty heavy. Now you hold it up, and this time, the heat's cooled down enough on it that it won't be as bad. But about there is where it stops forming scale. And so that's where you start planishing your material and or cleaning it up. You start going to brushing or whatever. You want a really nice clean look to it. So as long as you're exposing new material to the oxygen in the environment, it's going to continue to scale. So continue to scale on. So when you're forge welding, and we'll get to that later, if you can see your material, what do you think oxygen can do? Oxygen's just sitting in there like, hey, how's it going, guy? Woo! Well, you ruined your day. You know? So you don't want to be able to see your material when you're bringing it up to a welding heat. And I'll explain more to that effect here in a bit, how I go about, knowing and recognizing welding heat without being able to see that it's at welding heat. So you don't have to use a complicated die like this. You don't have to make a complicated collar die. Can you all see back there, this collar die? And I welcome anybody at lunch or otherwise or after demonstration. I'm going to be here for a while. So just come up, take a look at all the tools, get pictures. Get pictures of all the tooling and stuff that you haven't seen during the demonstration. So you know what, while I heat this up, I can pass it around real quick if everyone wants to take a quick look at it. So you don't have to have a super complicated die to take and do like a single rib collar around your piece. You don't have to have a bunch of complicated things. Basically, you need a recess to be that. That shape doesn't have to be a half round. It could be a pyramid shape, it could be octagonal, it could be whatever you've impressed into your die. And you can change the look up greatly. As you can see, the same die was used to make that collar, made this collar. It was the start. It was all the same. It's the same die got started there. With the addition of making an additional die, which is a roping die. This was made by simply doing a fuller. Fullering into a piece like this, you can pass these around, fullering into a bit of stock, not all the way deep, and then coming in with a ball fuller that had been squatted into an oval ball fuller, and coming in there and turning it sideways and then just hammering those depressions in by hand. Now if you wanted to do this where you're making out 50 foot of this type stock, you'd want to be a lot more accurate than that. You would make a master, that would be perfect, equal segments, and then you would beat it into that groove that I'm talking about there. But you can pass those all around. I'm assuming it'll come around here to the front. Similar, I can never say this word. Similarly. Wow. Alike. I can never say the word correct.
Quick, say aluminum.
Yeah, aluminum. I can do that one. So this, I made a master. I beat it into a block of steel, and then I added additional details in chasing. And what that produces is something that has flash on it. Rag, flash, extras, freebies, call it whatever you like, on the end there. And then that gets trimmed, we turned it into something like this. It's a very quick way. This is great if you want to make some really ornate door hinges, things like that. This is great for one-dimensional work, or two-dimensional work if it's on a wall, a door, or otherwise. So this would work nice in a hook as well. possible option. But that came out of that.
Huh.
But I selected a piece of material that had enough volume to fill that space, and I had to make a left and a right because it's two-dimensional, right? It's not on both sides. So I had to make a left and a right of that. So that beat down into there, created flash, and then you trim all that flashing off and you end up with something like this. Does that make sense? So I'll pass these around too as well. So this is just some different options you can do with collar work, with open die work. It seems super complex, but it's not. This here was nothing but a teardrop or a deer foot. Have you ever heard of a deer foot fuller? It's kind of, well, it looks like a deer foot, like half of a deer foot. It's bulbous on one end and then it tapers and it's rounded. That's what I cut in these veins with. I impression these veins with. So I'll pass this around as well. You guys can take a look at that and hand those around. And,
so you're just starting with a bigger piece, and then you get your impression set, and then you grind it down to the smaller size, or?
yeah, so you take away the flash. There's always going to be a little extra. I'm pretty sure there's math to figure out the exact amount of volume to fill that space. But I just trial and error. I say, okay, that looks about right. Beat it down. Oh, that's too much. That gets a lot of flash. I'll do something smaller next time until I get just the right amount to fill that space. But you make the blank first. So you make the master first. That's your template, if you will, and then you beat it down in there. You can do the same thing with rope swedging, crown molding swedgings, all sorts of stuff like that. And a lot of the really ornate or complex shapes that you'll see in like French Baroque ironwork, or in the Baroque and Rococo period, a lot of that is a build-up of different swedgings, different swedge material things going on. So you might see a collar like this, where it wraps around, and it's got a bunch of roping on it, right? And you're like, how did they put that rope in there and be able to bend that collar on around? Well, simply enough, they don't have it here. They left a space that was I haven't cut that off the bar yet, that was untouched for the corner. And then they came in with chasing tools afterwards, or files, and then they trued that up to the design. And that's how they sneaked that in there on you. So you're like, how in the world did they put a parakeet on the corner there? Well, that's how they did it. They swedged it, left a bit of mass at the corner that they could then dress. Same thing with forged collars that have a square corner. And I can give this to somebody who can pass this around. Same thing with forged collars that, like this is just a simple wrapped collar. See how I've left that round and I chased that square, filed that square, left that round. I did that. That was a stylization choice. But if I wanted to have sharp peaks out here on the collar, really sharp peaks on that round, I would have left a bit of material untouched at precisely those junctures when I forged out my collar material. And then when I bent it around, I would have had enough mass there that I could then clean up with top tools and chase out those top tools to make them cleaner. So, and again, I welcome everybody to come up and take a look at this after the show, after the event. Without further ado on that, I'm going to shut up and get to camera work here. Get this going. If we can start passing that initial die back up front, or make sure it goes around quickly, that'll be good. I'll get this material hot. I just need the additional die with that rib in the center.
What material is the die? Do you have to treat that?
So, on basically all my dies, I don't heat treat them. I let them do a little process that I like to call, I like to sweeten the die. So I like to work with the die unheat treated at first. A lot of times I find that I don't use the dies. I'll make them for a specific project and they'll get set off to one side. So I'm not taking the time to sit there and spend a lot of time heat treating them, take a risk of it cracking or otherwise having any other issues going through the quench. Most of my material, I make my dies like swedges or hardy tools, things like that. I like to make all that out of 1045, 1060, 1075, 1095, 1095 at the max. That's more for like hot cut hardies or things like that. But generally, most of my struck tools or dies, I like making out of 1045. So, and you'll also notice I'm very, very sloppy when it comes, for anybody who looked at these dies, I'm very, very sloppy when it comes to the hardy shank on it, right? Like, I get paid to create something for a client. We'll get paid to spend a lot of time making this pretty, right? This doesn't have to be pretty. This has got to go in there and disappear and use it. When I'm done with it, it goes and sits on a rack that I don't look at. So, you know, I don't care that this hardy stem is ugly and there's some bolts there. None of that concerns me at all. Because I'm not a tool maker. I'm into ornamental ironwork. Ornamental artist, blacksmith, whatever. Call me whatever you will. Just not late for dinner. Okay? So we're gonna dress this collar first to go in this die. I'm gonna use the marker board here because if you're gonna make collars, this is an important step in the process. So I'm gonna go up on the diamond. Okay? Doesn't matter which side, it's a square right now. We'll go up on the diamond, and I'm going to flatten off those sides. I'll make sure that forging is nice and even. What this does for me this centers the mass of my material over the center rib of where I'm going to be forging down in. You see how I've made this trapezoid shape? It centers the mass inside that die. Without doing that, and you've got these square corners sitting down in there, okay, your mass is actually centered to the left and right like a teeter-totter. And so what happens is when you hammer on it, or you go to take a swing, you rotate slightly by accident. When you do that, you move that center of mass off, and so therefore your collar, the center rib, gets off to one side. And you can see that in this collar ring here. There's one of them where I did it correctly, and one incorrectly, and you can see the difference that it makes. One, I would have to dress the side of the collar. I'd have to grind it at this point, but there's no putting that mass back over to the other side. You see how it went to one side or the other. So you guys can take a look at that, pass that one around. But so centering, taking off your left and right and centering this mass in the die, when it comes out the next time, now I can get that rib truly in the center of my collar material, in the center of that flux piece. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do now. I'll heat this piece back up. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of my little bands of iron here. I'm going to line them all up. I'm just going to kind of assess them. You know, not all of them are perfectly aligned out at the edges. You kind of see a little bit of a slope to them. You know, there's not much of a, some of them are just a tiny bit shorter than the others. What I'm going to do, none of that really matters to me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take whichever one, say, if I find two that are almost identical, those are going to become a pair. Then I'll look for my next pair, and then those will become a pair. Just like if you're wanting to make tongs for yourself, is my suggestion that you just draw out and make a bunch of halves. Fill up 4, 5, 6, 7 buckets full of them. And then when you need tongs, I know, you'll get good at it. That's what I'm telling you. So, so once you've done that, right, you can pull them, and look. Nah, that's not quite right. That's not quite right. Woo, okay, hey, that's close. We'll set that off as a pair. And then you don't have to pay super close attention to how long the handle rein is. It might be an inch longer, it might be a little less, you know. And that's how I make the tongs in my shop. I'll just draw something out lickety split, do whatever shaping for the jaws and the boss, and I'll set it off the side. I might make 20, 30 pair in a setting and leave them all in a bucket, and then I'll figure out which ones I need. And I leave them in halves like that until I need them. So like I may have a project come up and I don't have the right size, right? Then I can go to my pair bucket, they're all blanks. Okay, these are going to bank it, and then I form the jaws out and fit them to whatever size I need or some weird shape, you know, and you can do that. So similarly with these scrolls, just going to line up one edge, make sure that's all flat on one edge, and then we're going to look at them, and we're going to look across them and see which ones match closely to one another, and those will become pairs as well. And then that will help us build out the rest of the material. So I'm going to go ahead and roll this out here. You can see how these are all different, kind of close, right? Close, but not really. Yeah, they're just a hair on. Okay. For the sake of demonstration, this one was just too much of an oddball. We got too much thickness here, so I am going to take just a bit more out of this one. But the rest of these are great. So do middle, middle. Those are ready to go. Set them sitting right here, just like that. Now I've got to make one to match this, or come close with thickness and length here. Then you draw out just a bit of material out of that end. So I'm going to do that real quick. Just a little bit of thickness there. Great thing about this is to make that adjustment, right? It's just a few moments because it's such thin material. It heats up real quick. The method was a little bit different because we had a crossbar came across. So what we did ultimately is we took these pieces and we nicked them and we folded them. So you beat out this much material, then you nicked it and folded it back. So we really only need the scrolls to come out and branch on top, but they're going to be flat across the bottom where that cross or that T-bar would come across. With this hook, this is an interesting challenge, and one I have yet to be fully happy with yet. It creates an interesting issue, the challenge of not welding too much material, but also welding enough for them to stay together and look right. If you weld up too much material, gravel it up at me. If you weld up too much material, then you shorten the length of your scrolls, right? You get this big long area, you weld it up too much, now your little scrolls are like, you get a little half turn out on the scroll. So you've got to keep your welding heat really localized in one area and not overwork it, not overwork the piece. Like I said, I'm pretty much terrible at it right now. Getting that. It welds out at about the width of the base of my hammer, just a little over the width of my hammer. So I've been trying to get better and better at doing that without having the thing become too long, the welding section become too long. So it's really important to get these tack welded up and then move along with your day. Don't keep working at them. That's an annoying sound, is it not? The lady strips on, so what we're aiming for is we're aiming for the center of this material. Now ideally, in a perfect world, if these had been truly 1/8-inch thick strips, you would have a 3/8-inch cross section here. We don't live in a perfect world, so that's not going to happen with these particular things. What we're going to do is we're going to pinch this by one end, okay? Pinch this by one end, and what we don't want to have is this. We don't want that to happen. So what we need to do is we need to create a situation. We're almost doing a football, right? So we need to where those lay like that, nice on top of one another. So So we're going to have to do that adjustment right here, cold. Don't have to use any heat. You just give it a little bit of a bend and lay it down here. Now obviously if it's hot while you're trying to do this, which I recommend not be hot, you may end up needing to, super hot when you do this, you just lightly tap it with the hammer. The whole point is to get those to come down to where they don't spring up when you're squeezing them. See how we're getting it close? We want these to stay close together. So when you squeeze down on the taper, what's going to happen? It's going to follow the cross section of that taper, right? So you have to give it a bit of a curve so it follows along. Doesn't have to be super drastic, but it does have to be fairly substantial. See how it goes together? Now, see how it's together? Nice and tight, like a bundle. As to this one, so that one's done. This one, if I stick this one together, I squeeze that paper, that's apart. That's what we don't want that. We don't want that to be apart like that. So you'll have to bend it to where it goes together. So if you got two pieces that are laying nicely, you know this piece is the weird one. Sometimes all it is whoop, and it's good to go. Be able to tell. I just know I want to aim for somewhere in here. Somewhere at the halfway point. Somewhere in there. That's where I want to hit. So a little close to this jaw, a little less on that. I know there's about an inch or so of material sticking in the jaw. So I just kind of shift my focus to, yeah, right about there. That's where I want to weld it. So I'm going to try to focus getting my heat in here. When you're welding this, you have to understand this isn't a whole bar yet, right? So this is 3 individual 1/8 inch or less pieces, right? So 3 individual 1/8 inch or less pieces. You do need to rotate this in the fire. Set it on edge, set it on top, bottom side. You need to rotate it because the hottest portion of this welding fire is going to be at the bottom, right? So it's where the most air is interacting with the coke. Hook this in here. So this is the part where you have to kind of trust yourself and that you've got it in the right spot. It's going to be really difficult, right? So I figure I can see a little bit of it poking out over there. I can see some of it poking out here. I'm just guesstimating that the hot spot, that center nucleus of the fire, is right where I need it to be, and it's all going to work out okay. I can't leave it like that too long, I got to flip it. And I'll show you why. See how hot that one side already became versus this side? So it comes out pretty hot, pretty quick. So you have to get it in here and you have to rotate regularly. Now when I get close, to a welding heat on my pieces, I will do something that I haven't seen many other smiths do. So I like to reduce the airflow on the fire, okay? And to drive off any additional oxygen in the forging environment, I will throw some green coal across the top. And some of the fire's energy will be devoted, some of that oxygen will be consumed by that new material lighting off and igniting for the first time, and it will help you from burning up your material. This thin of material, you really get just kind of a few goes of it, 1 to 2 shots to get it right, and then it's not. So then it's not going to weld. So. So all I'm looking for here is for this to stick together. I'm not trying to get a full weld on this piece. You notice how I've took it up pretty hot, but I don't have any sparklers yet. Now it's ready to come out. No flux. Just tacking that together. Give it a little bit of a brush. And I'll take that in for one more quick heat. When I weld, I don't play around. So I don't sit here, don't analyze it, don't do anything. Usually I don't even brush it. I will tack, tack, get it right back in the fire. Bring it back up, keep it at that higher heat, to that welding heat. And go. So now, one of those hits I worked on the side, I ended up popping one of these that weren't overly tacked well. So, this is mostly welded. I'll just show it off here. It's not what I normally do. It's not, but it's not advantageous for anybody here. You can see I've made the tack weld right in here. See that? The weld's just right in here. Obviously, you can still see your lines. I'm trying to not weld too much material. So I've aimed for center. And again, that is what I call it. It's just tack weld right there. So now if I want to refine that a little bit more, now at this point, I've been sitting here in the oxygen environment. It's been scaling up, right? It's getting scale in between the layers. So in the forging fire, I created a oxygen neutral environment, so I don't need flux on that first weld. Ideally, I won't need flux at all. I wouldn't need flux at all to weld, because you control that in your forge environment. You don't control that with flux. Flux doesn't protect the material from scale or from oxidization. It's not what it's there for. Clean the agent. Flux eats away that surface oxide. It moves into the edges of that material through capillary action, pulls that dirt, grime, junk, basically your iron oxide, pulls it to the edges of the material. So flux is not needed. Flux is helpful. Flux is helpful, but it's not needed. So here where I've been talking, right? I've gotten scale in there. I've built up a heavy crust. Just like on the outside, you see how crusted this is on the outside? The same thing's in between those layers. So if I try right now to go put this in and try to weld it, I'm going to fail miserably. I can beat this till the cows come home, and it's never going to weld. I'm never going to weld any more of this, because that scale gets trapped in between those layers. This big, heavy, pimply scale you see on the outside, right? That gets trapped in the layers. So that is what flux is for. You put flux on it. The flux will wick through the material, eating at those iron oxides on the surface of the material. And as it does that at temperature, at a high temperature, it moves, like I said, it moves with capillary action, it moves that towards the edges of your joint, leaving a clean surface behind in order for it to stick, in order for you to weld it together. Similar for, I don't know how many people in here are welders. Show of hands. How many people weld? Weld for a living? Sat through any sort of welding training?
YouTube, does that count?
What's that?
Just watching YouTube videos on welding.
Watching YouTube videos on welding. So, well, that kind of counts as training, kind of down-home training. So, I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of flux on here, mainly because I want you to see the action of it, the way that it works through the joint. So I'm going to warm this piece back up. I'll sprinkle a little. This area in here is just kind of it's not the nicest. So that is tacked together enough for where I need to go. And you'll see me use flux on the collar when I weld the collar. I use flux whenever there is going to be a scale trap, an oxidization trap, that I'm not going to easily be able to expel the iron oxide from the joint from. That's when I use flux. So the flux will get in there and it will clean that out for me, and I can actually make a good weld. So I'll come in here and I'll brush this one more to get time here. Just for fun. And we'll sprinkle that flux on there.
Borax or product placement?
So this is a commercial anhydrous borax.
Post that on YouTube. Look at the camera when you see it.
So I just sprinkled it on that one edge. Look how she's going already on the surface. It'll do that internally as well. It'll come out the bottom if there's any cracks for it to find its way down. See how it's wicking down the sides a little bit? So at heat, it just does this more rapidly. It's easier to do it when you just shut up and get it done. Get after it.
Are you doing like a count in your head? Like, I know this, so count to 15 or something? Or?
No, what I'm looking for in the fire, I've placed the material in a hot spot at the fire. And then I'm looking for that hot spot to come up to the observable weldable temperature of the material that I'm going after. That did stick on the top. Got half of it to go, the other half I did not.
So you're not looking at the material in the fire, you're looking at like a designated spot. That is close enough that is like, okay, that's at temp, so then I know my material is at temp.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm looking for the particular place in the fire that the material. So say if you know that when you bring out your steel, it's got in your particular lighting in your shop, that the steel has got to be white hot. Say you're in a super dark shop, and when you look in there, you bring that steel out, and instead of welding heat, it just looks white hot, right? Then I'm looking for the coat on the internal side of that fire to get white hot, according to those viewing conditions. If you're out demonstrating, say out at a public park and you're in full sunlight, white hot, actual white hot, and therefore burnt up for you, and the high carbon bit you were welding into an axe or something like that, might actually look red or orange in full sunlight. So if you're in those type of conditions, those are super challenging conditions to weld in, and not advisable. You are going to burn stuff up, and it's just going to be part of the demonstration. But yeah, so you're looking inside the fire. I'm looking for the fire to be the color I want my steel to be. And then I'm reducing the airflow to try to get more of a neutral flame. And again, if I got a little bit of excess oxygen pouring in, you can throw on some green coal there towards the end of that heat to help suck up some of that extra oxygen. Throw too much on, it'll cool. It's like to chill the fire, it's kind of counterproductive. But you want to throw enough on to heat up some of your extra oxygen there. Come on, you. Get up there. So one thing I'd like to say about forge welding, it really is one of those things, at first you don't succeed, try, and try again, right? It's something you can really do that with. There's not too many things out there in the world that you can do that, but with forge welding, it's one of them. You can take and, if it doesn't stick, clean it, put it back. Get it reset, put it back in there. Eventually, you'll get it to a point where it won't stick, you've gotten it too crusty, and you've beaten it to smithereens, and then it's over with. Gentle with it, gentle with it. Don't fail in front of all these people. They don't need to know. Where's that secret can of flux underneath it? So, I got an itch.
Every time you brush, it's right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's technically secretly laced with flux. That's the real trick. So, all right, I can't possibly take another go on this. I'm going to have to be happy with it and weld it onto the main bar. Set up. My experience with wire has been poor all around. Generally speaking, the wire heats up, it expands, and it falls off. No matter how tight they crank it, I mean, so you have to put an excessive amount of wraps on it. Yeah, I've not had luck with wire. The only time I've had luck with wire is on much longer pieces, where I can wire it where it won't be in the fire at any time. I've had success there. But anytime I've tried to wire up small pieces, they fail. They just fail miserably. Even when I worked with Tom Latney, when I interned with him, and we were making locks, making door locks, and wiring up components for keys to be brazed, forge brazed, those failed half the time. At least half the time they failed. You know, the wire would get too hot before the braze would go, and then it was a mess. You had a wire there, and you had to file out. The wire was stuck in the braze, and brazed itself to the piece. And I developed a real piece for it. Tom Latney shop. Oh. But it's a valid, valid question. And, using wire can be done. I've just never had the success with it that I felt like I needed to have to make it more useful to me. In my own shop, I have a tendency to put a little MIG wire on stuff if I really need it, if I'm really concerned about it. Not being able to get it like this. This is helpful to show that you can do this without a modern arc welder, right? Like, not everybody has a welder at their disposal. And so, this is how it would have been done, potentially. There's even a problem with saying that. This is how it would have been done back in the day, right? Because we don't really know how they would have done it back in the day. If they would have had welders back in the day, would they have used the welders back in said day, right? If they had, if they had rivet guns, if they had this, if they had that. Most of the stuff we enjoy now, innovations of labor-saving devices, came from blacksmiths back in the day, right? So the only thing you can say to be more accurate when you're saying like, oh, this is traditionally how it would have been done, is to actually talk more specifically about a time period in general. So saying, okay, yeah, back in 1402, this is how they were doing ironwork, right? That's really the only way that you can be accurate with that statement of back in the day. They would have done it this way. Because ultimately, there was a lot of forges back there then, in those days. And just like now, there was a whole host and a whole skill set and range of skills. You know, just because you call a master plumber doesn't mean he's a good master plumber. You know what I'm saying? You don't know. You might call a master plumber and you don't know how that poop rolls downhill. I mean, that's, you know, that's happened before. So not every contractor is a wonderful contractor, a building contractor to work with, right? Same thing back in the day, you can apply that. Not every blacksmith was the top class tier of blacksmith. We forget that sometimes now in our oh so perfect society. We try to make everything perfect, and we really idolize the guys of old as if they have achieved something that's unachievable by us today. In fact, I think it would be the other way around. If they were to be flash forward now, you could go back and show them a quick clip of a video on YouTube. This magical portal that's in that guy's pocket. There's a guy who talked to me, right? If you were to show them that, it would blow their mind. Now we're trying to bring this up to heat and try not to burn. Remember, we got 2 pieces in here. And in certain areas in the fire, we have 4 pieces, 4 individual pieces. We have a thick piece, and we have a whole bunch of little thin pieces. So you got to be real careful how we heat these, so we don't burn it all up. Back in my day, that weld stuck without flux. That's the kind of old man I'm going to be.
Back in my day, they were needing that on the weld. Just did it.
Back in my day, I used that magical pixie powder on everything. It welded cold. And on 1,200 degrees, you believe that?
Made my wife's cooking taste good.
My wife uses the fire alarm for a timer. Well, you might think it's funny. I gotta eat it.
There are some YouTube cooking channels I'd like to point her to. I'll make sure that was extra stuck. Now, if you want to tell whether your weld is stuck, without being able to tell whether your weld is stuck, without having to torture test it, you let this cool. Theoretically, if these two this welded surface is stuck together, these should cool at the same rate of speed. So if you're working with high carbon steel, with marrying it to low carbon steel, there will be a slight temperature difference. The high carbon will cool off marginally quicker. In my experience, like on the corners or edges, it'll cool off fairly quick. You see how that's cooling off all at one rate of speed? Yeah. If that wasn't welded, whichever's the thinner bit of material would have already cooled down. It would have cooled down, it would start getting darker quicker than the other side. So that's stuck together. But see, I haven't spent a lot of time just wailing on this, right? Trying to get it. It doesn't look overly stuck, does it? It just kind of looks like it's on there. But I don't want to. I'm just packing it all up together to put the other bundle on there. So on this, I want to show on this handle real quick because it's kind of hard to tell where we're at. What I did, I'm going to use my hammer as an example. what I did is I found that notch, that last notch like so. And my very first operation was to drive straight down like this on it. Because what I was trying to do is I'm trying to pull that material that away and get it away from my rope. If I came in flat like this, okay, chances are, may not be perfect, I'm going to hit that and it's going to bounce. When it bounces, it's going to move. When it moves, it's going to find that second rope that I didn't want it to find. So I'm coming in on that sharp corner and I'm finding that and matching the pitch of that scroll, and then I'm driving straight down. And that's pushing that material, much like a butcher. It is pushing that material over so then I can bring it up flat and drive down the rest of the mass and pull it out. It's kind of hard to tell on this end. You know, obviously I'm doing something over here. But for those of you that wasn't overly apparent, that is what I'm attempting to do when I'm rocked way down there like that. See how I pushed that little pooch out there? That's because I laid that over and pushed it out. When we drive it this way, put it back down. But if you too are also not getting paid well on your YouTube channel, if you also are like me, a coal forge works pretty darn good.
Hard to get the big pieces in the induction forge.
What's that?
It's hard to get the big pieces in the induction forge.
Yeah. Now, I have never actually got to use an induction forge. I've seen them on TV. And from where I was sitting, they look pretty darn good.
I have one, I really like.
They are a specialty, in my opinion, they are a specialty forge. You know, they're not a one-size-fits-all thing. They're great if you're going to do a lot of production stuff, you know. You got them set up, say you're beating fence pickets, or say you're drawing out points on the end of, you know, tent stakes. That's a great use for them, you know. Doing something where you're doing like open die forging of some sort, you just go right here. Okay, it's out here. Bang, bang, bang. Chuck it in a pile. Right? And you keep doing that. That is really, really handy. So, what I've got here is when I had bent it, it's not overly sharp. So I want to sharpen up that corner. I don't want it to be too rounded there. I want it to come down and meet that last little section there. So we're going to do that by heating right here in this corner, by pushing this down right like that in the fire. We're going to heat in there. And then we're going to use back face hammer blows to drive and upset that material back. And that's going to square it up for us. What you'll see is it'll over forge, or it'll over bend, if you will. That's fine. See how we sweeten that up? And it'll get better when we put it on welding. It's got welding. You know, it's not still on. Next side. Now it gets difficult. And I've regretted this since I left my house. Every bit. I left my house without my big. I had a big iron that went and had a perfect horn to work on small stuff like this. I do swear I do this for a living. And in my own shop and in my own way, I am quite the professional. I really am. Just not right now. Don't look at me. Don't look upon my shame. For like a month, like time to go.
Fatigue sets in, is that when you go into the rants?
Yeah, yeah. See if we fit this. This is the greatest. Alright, so we got a collar that'll fit on there. It's not quite where we need it to be just yet. It needs to be snugged up a little bit. You see that? So it's got that space in there. It's got a good bit of space. Technically, we could almost grab a little bit more of that material and bring it on around. So it's got a good bit of space left in there. So what I may do, I may ride it up on that edge and take one more knob on there. I don't think when I forge this down, I forged enough on the right area. See how much space there is in there? Yeah, there. So I'm going to adjust that by knocking out, undoing work. I'm going to undo a little bit. I'm going to just forge that out a little bit and then bend it all around. And then hopefully that'll snug it up. Again, that's going to give me a little extra material there, so it'll kind of come around on it. Another way, if you're a lot closer than that, you can have it sit up here on the anvil, get it hot, and just drive this material down, you know, a little bit. I would suggest doing that with a rope, because then you squeeze up your ropes together. But on just a standard rib, you can upset that material. So if the collar's a little, you know, just a little wide, you can upset the material. It is better to have a collar that's too tight, because you can always draw a little more material. You can put it over the horn of the anvil, and with the top set, you can peel some more material out, get a little more length to it as you go. If it's too long, there's only so much compression work you can do to compress that back in on itself. And it really doesn't like that.